Hi, everyone. Kayla here from GI Jobs, Director of Military Partnerships. Really excited to have you here today and super excited for all the connections you're going to make with all of the amazing employers that we have. And today we have something really special. We have a success story with a dear friend who has got an amazing story to tell and lots of good advice for you. So with that being said, our guest speaker for today is Matt Disher from Cushman Wakefield. Matt, if you want to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background on where you're at and what you do.
And how we got here. Hey, Kayla, thanks for having me. It's Matt Disher at Cushman Wakefield. I lead the military and veteran programs here at Cushman Wakefield. And we are a top-ranked, top 10 military-friendly employer due to the hard work that we've put in across the board on a national level. Not only to engage our men and women who are transitioning out of the military, but the top talent that exists out here in the workspace, those of us who have served in the armed forces. I'm a Marine veteran. I went into the military to learn construction trades as a combat engineer, and as it turns out, I never got to really construct much of anything, and I ended up with infantry units blowing things up on the explosive side of combat engineering. And when I came out of the military, I found that my resume and the things that I had done in the military really didn't match up to a lot of jobs out here in the civilian space. And the resources that exist today, such as virtual career fairs, simply did not exist when I got out back then. And so I've used my own experience in transitioning out of the military, the hardships of trying to figure out what I do next, to now place those best practices into companies. And I've been fortunate that I've had the opportunity to build and lead these types of programs in a handful of different organizations. But every day, I also get to advise some of the largest companies in the United States about how to build their own world-class military and veteran programs. And I get to do that every day here at Cushman Wakefield.
Sounds like a pretty awesome job, Matt.
Can't complain. Can't complain. It's a dream job. I can't complain.
So how did you get there, right? Like, you've got such a background and you've been, from recruit military to private sector. I mean, you've done a lot, right? And how did you end up where you are now, building such an amazing program with Cushman Wakefield, being recognized for those efforts? And what kind of challenges did you face on that path?
The long story of this is that I was transitioning out of the armed forces. I had dropped resumes and applications into countless companies, hundreds of companies, as I recall, as a 23-year-old leaving the military. I didn't have a college degree at the time. I got picked up actually by the Cincinnati Police Department, working in dispatch for 4.5 years on a night shift and going to college during the day. So I decided after 4 years in the Marines of not sleeping that I wanted to do 4 more years of not sleeping. And it was a really good opportunity working for the police department. I got a lot of really good exposure to things there. But at one point in time, my wife and I were starting a family, and the night shift wasn't going to roll anymore. And I had to go figure it out. And I ended up with Recruit Military, effectively as a salesperson, selling solutions to companies that were trying to do more military and veteran hiring. And along the lines, I went to pitch to a company that wanted to look at some of the services, wanted to do a better job of hiring military and veterans, and ended up just accepting a position with them. And that was Total Quality Logistics in Cincinnati, Ohio, who's now one of the largest third-party logistics companies in the country, just a national leader in that type of work. So I got to build a program there. We got very early recognition, namely from GI Jobs as a military-friendly employer back then. Then the Cintas Corporation called me up one day, and Cintas has been leading a military program for probably since the late 80s and early 90s, one of the longest running military and veterans programs in corporate America. And they asked me to come lead their program. And so I did that for a number of years, and looked for career progression, moved to a couple other places, and I've ended up at Cushman Wakefield as they were aiming to expand their military and veterans programs. The way I got to where I am now is that I took it personally. I looked around and I said, so many of us, up to 200,000 people, leave the armed forces every year, and many of us maybe don't know what our next steps are. And there are those challenges of leaving the armed forces. The way I like to put it is, imagine that you're in a room while you're in the military with all of these other things and people and cultures that you know, right? Everybody with whom you live, work, and play, they're in that room as well. And you can see out of the room, but you really live and exist and work in that room. One day that door opens and you have to leave that room, but you have to leave everything behind. It's a very tough transition. It's not just switching to another job. It's not just graduating college and going down the street to your first post-college job. I took that personally, that my own experience out of the Marine Corps was difficult, and that I have seen and I've advised so many people from E4s to colonels who are having their own difficulties transitioning. And I decided that, if companies could find value in this type of work, if companies could recognize that not only are you getting top talent in the workforce, which every company wants, you're getting some of the most skilled, diverse, educated, and experienced men and women on the face of the earth to come join your organization. You just need a little bit of a push to understand maybe what they've been doing in uniform. If we can get that right, then we are hiring the best talent the workforce has to offer. And the other opportunity there is that not only do I get to do this great work for Cushman Wakefield, but as I mentioned in my intro, I get to do this work alongside of some of the other largest companies in America, actually companies small and large, that are investing in this workforce. Second to that, there's great talent here, but it's also really good for business. You get some of the top performers inside of your business, and that allows those people to come into your organization and impact positively your business and your operations and your bottom line as they did in the military. So you're able to take that same dedication and workforce and work ethic and the zero fail environments and now basically put a suit on and come do it inside of your business. We're in a client-facing industry, which means our clients are some of the largest companies in America, and they're doing some of this work too. And now we're able to sit alongside of them at the table and do it as a service provider and as one of the largest commercial real estate services companies in the world. It meets their cultural alignment. Our clients like to see it. Our clients are doing it. And now we get to advise them on how to do this type of work as well.
That's awesome. Matt, so you've had, throughout your career journey, you've had a lot of companies that have reached out to you, right? Because of the things that you've done in the space, all of the accomplishments that you've had, really because you've got a really strong network. What kind of advice could you give to our attendees today on how best to network, or why having a network like yours is important and how that helped you along your journey?
I realized very early that in some cases, and this may go against all of the rules you've ever heard about how to find your next job and how to find success in whatever it is that you're doing. Obviously, there's a very strong sense of knowing the right stuff. It's having the right certifications and qualifications and experience. That's obviously very valuable inside of any organization, any company, any government institution, et cetera. Any job is going to need you to know how to do your job. But what I found was that in some cases, the challenge was not learning how to do the work. The challenge was getting to the right person so that they knew that you knew how to do the work. And I have found that a lot of candidates, I watch social media, I see LinkedIn, I see Facebook, I follow the veterans groups. One of the most glaring responses that I had ever heard when companies were advertising that they were military friendly, or companies that wanted to say that they were ready to hire veterans and things like that, is that candidates would give feedback that said, I applied and nobody called me back. And the issue was, in my eyes, the same issue I faced as a transitioning service member. It's not that they weren't hiring veterans, it's that they just didn't hire me. And it's because I either didn't get to the right person, or I didn't forge or form my resume to be the right resume that they needed. And what's more is that with the advent of all the digital resources for finding talent, a recruiter might have 40 or 50 or 60 requisitions that they're working on at any given time, and there might be 200 to 300 candidates in each requisition. So imagine you're a 26, 28-year-old recruiter with limited knowledge on what the military looks like, and now you're dealing with potentially thousands of applicants applying to your jobs, and you're working on these things in a very fast pace, and you're trying to produce the top quality candidate for your organization. You're not going to have a whole lot of time to necessarily get with, for example, the average military resume coming out of the military that might have a lot of military jargon and a lot of military speak on it. they're not going to have time to review that and really interpret that. So they might set it aside and pass you up. What happens inside of a military-friendly organization is that sometimes we have programs that are dedicated to allowing that candidate to now be interpreted. So to the average candidate looking around for a job, whether you're right out of the military or you've been out of the military for a handful of years, the networking component is largely going to be your most successful asset. It's going to be your most useful asset. I jokingly say this: the top 3 things you can do to find your next great role are to network, and to network. You can apply to jobs all day long. You can drop resumes into digital resources and resume books and things like that. But what you need to do ultimately is get to the right person. You need to ask the right questions to the right person so that they can figure out maybe there's a little bit of interpretation they need to do on your resume to help you get to the right spot. And that's where suddenly I know the job, I have the experience. All of that comes into play once you get to the right person first.
Absolutely. Great words of advice, Matt. And so if you could go back and change anything from the beginning of your career transition to when you got your first job, what would it be? That's a lot, right?
Geez, a lot of things. A lot of things. I thought I had some really good experiences in the Marine Corps. I did some really cool things with some really good units, and through training and different deployments, just a lot of really cool stories to tell. And coming out of the Marine Corps, I didn't know how to tell those stories, or rather I leaned too heavily on those stories. In other words, my resume said that I could operate weapon systems and explosives, and that I was attached to, Fox Company 2-1, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, or I was at 1st Combat Engineer Battalion, or I was at 29 Palms for this training exercise, a double combined arms exercise. None of that means anything to anybody out in the civilian space. In fact, it probably only means something to other Marines who would recognize the language. And so I thought that maybe employers or recruiters would be impressed by some of that, we see in pop culture. We watch Top Gun, we watch the movies, we see the Lone Survivor movie and the different series that have come out about the military. Everybody loves the military culture. America loves its veterans. But what ends up happening is that companies love the military and love the veterans, and the individual hiring managers might have an affinity for us. However, they need to invest in the right people to come work inside of their organizations. And just having the military background, the really cool stories on my resume, simply didn't sell me as a candidate. So I think that if I could go back and change one major thing, it would be the ability to tell an employer through my resume that 90% of the time I wasn't blowing things up and shooting guns. 90% of the time I wasn't, putting camouflage paint on my face, sneaking around on the beach or something like that. 90% of the time I was planning operations or training with Marines. I was training 10 or 15 or 300 Marines in urban warfare, or I was dealing with making sure that my Marines had the proper education and certifications to go do their jobs, or the Marine who was having a problem back home with his family and needed to get on an airplane and go take care of something, that I was taking care of that person, because that's really leadership, that's management. And those are the things that translate to what we do out here in the civilian workforce.
Absolutely. And I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story and such awesome words of encouragement and sharing your experience so that our attendees can learn. If you could give any word of advice or anything to give our attendees a good farewell off into that awesome world of career searching, what would it be?
Yeah, it is this, and this was some of the best advice that I ever got. And I live in the world of what I would call tough love. And that is that your transition is 100% up to you. Your transition, or whether you're coming out of the military or just switching jobs, it is 100% your responsibility. So lean on the resources you have out there, network with them, but understand that all of your successes sit in your hands, and you must be exceptionally diligent to get to your next step. Whatever you want out of your career, you have to be very diligent. You have to work hard to go get it. This is the same thing that I tell my son at home, and that I mentor and advise, again, leaders in the military down to the person who's just spent a couple of years in the military. And that is that the hustle, the hard work, the knocking on the appropriate doors, asking people for things, not asking them for jobs necessarily, but asking them for advice. Those are the things that will get you to the next step. So work diligently, work as hard as you can, as though your life depends on it, because it really does. Your success is in front of you. It's in your own hands, but you have to be willing to own everything that happens to you from this point forward.
Great words of advice. Well said. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to explore some of the employers that we have with us today at the Virtual Career Fair. We wish you the best of luck. Don't forget to upload your resume, chat with as many employers as you can, and make those connections and network. And like Matt said, be sure to knock on every door. Thanks again for joining us today, Matt, and good luck, everyone.